Journey's End by Dirk Wehner. Read by Jonathan Cox. From the viewport of the Eternatus Luminis's bridge, Shield Captain Gallian Magathus of the Emissaries Imperatus studied the drifting wreckage. It hung lopsided in the starless void like a puppet with its strings cut loose. The strike cruiser, once fiery orange, was now so battered and torn it appeared dark and lifeless. Crystallized oxygen billowed into the blackness from ragged breaches in the ship's hull. At the prow of the ship, proudly depicted on a black field, was a stylized silver ram. The battle-scarred cruiser was surrounded by dozens of smaller vessels. Their shapes left no doubt about their origin. Orks. The crude ships looked equally lifeless and battered, though one could never be sure with the greenskins.
After everything we have been through to pinpoint their position,
a voice next to Magathus muttered. He turned to see Captain Allagan Moores, the leader of the Grey Shields. The Primaris Space Marine didn't look at the custodian, instead watching the enormous wreckage that had brought their fleet here.
"I imagine you and your brothers are disappointed," Magathus answered.
His voice was cold. He felt no sympathy for the Space Marines that the Torchbearer fleet had brought here. The custodian did not care for their feelings, nor did he fully trust them. The Astartes might have hoped to unite with their new chapter, but all Magathus saw in the ravaged battle cruiser was another vital military asset lost to the Imperium in times of dire need. He leant onto his Castellan axe, the shaft of the huge weapon firmly planted onto the metal flooring. "We've come a long way, and we've fought for every mile of it. It seems all that is left for us to do is pick up the pieces." Indeed, it had not been an easy journey to find the flames of Ares. Their chapter had been known to be remarkably headstrong, and they always had been on the move from one battle to the next, punching from war zone to war zone in even quicker succession than usual for a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. This would have made tracking their movements a daunting task even at the best of times, let alone now, here in the Imperium Nihilus. After the opening of the Great Rift, they had been last seen operating in the vicinity of the Shadefrost sector, where they briefly fought alongside the 112th Talon to stop a demonic incursion on the ravaged plains of Shadefrost Prime. Immediately after victory had been secured, they had manned their ships. After that, their trail had gone cold, and reports of further sightings were conflicting. All contact with the flames of Ares had been lost. Until now. Shield Captain Gallian Magathus's fleet was one of the many that had been sent on the venture to find lost chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, re-establish contact, and bring them the gift of the Primaris Space Marines. Torchbearers, those fleets were called, and rightfully so, for they brought the Emperor's light back into the truly darkest places. This particular fleet consisted of elements of the Adeptus Custodes, Imperial Navy, Adeptus Mechanicus, Astra Militarum, Sisters of Silence, 10 full companies of Grey Shield Primaris Space Marines with the gene seed of the Imperial Fists, plus several dozen non-military ships for maintenance and logistics. All in all, it was a force powerful enough to punch through the dangerous war zones of the Imperium Nihilus, securing beachheads and driving off the darkness. In their quest to find the flames of Ares, the Torchbearer fleet had fought in countless conflicts. Magathus could never fully silence his doubts about the Adeptus Astartes, but even he acknowledged that the Grey Shields had proven their worth over and over in the toxic wastelands of Mundus Limus. They had met the Night Lords in a grinding battle, driving them off the planet. Here they found a crashed Thunderhawk in the heraldry of the flames of Ares. Readings from the data cogitators of the destroyed gunship brought them to the hive world of Glaba. Readings from the data cogitators of the destroyed gunship brought them to the hive world of Glaber, where they rooted out a gene-stealer cult infestation together with the warriors of the Adeptus Custodes. In the lair of the slain Patriarch, the Grey Shields found a single battered suit of Terminator armor, painted in bright orange colors. It remained a mystery how it got there, but clenched in its fist, they discovered a data slate with more recent records of the flames of Ares. After a dozen further wars on the trail of the elusive chapter, the brazen shark carder of the Sisters of Silence that accompanied the Torchbearer fleet captured an Eldari Farseer in the jungles of Linth Secundus. In the jungles of Linth II, the obscure prophecies of the Xenos finally directed them into the Villapan system. The closer they came, the more evidence of destruction they found. The flames of Ares had downright slaughtered a path through the system, forcing their way through a teeming orc infestation. They had annihilated several fleets and star forts of the Greenskins on their way, but in the end, they seemed to have lost their momentum. Eventually, they had found themselves surrounded by Xenos hordes. Thus, they had chosen to fight their glorious last stand.
My lords, Magos Dominus Zohulus Vul of the Comet Nucleus reports that their Augurium sensory arrays have detected life signs aboard the target vessel.
The words of the bridge officer tore Magathus from his musings.
Life signs of what origin? He asked.
The bridge officer checked his data slate.
Most of them seem to be greenskin boarding parties pillaging the ship, he explained. But there's a cluster of them around the bridge section. It's hard to make out between all the other signals, but Dominus Vul has estimated a chance that some of the flames of Ares might still be alive and defending their bridge.
Magathus raised an eyebrow.
Might be alive? Has Dominus Vul tried hailing them? He has, Shield Captain, but to no avail. Scans indicate that they have lost any means for communication.
If there is any chance that our brothers are still alive, we must act now,
Captain Allagan Moores interjected.
We must form a boarding party and secure the bridge immediately.
I agree, Captain, Magathus said coldly, although I can't remember when command of this operation passed into your hands.
The Castellan axe cut through the neck of another brutish warrior. Blood sprayed from the severed stump, but the corridor was so narrow it didn't even reach the floor, splattering the howling orcs next to their decapitated comrade instead. The teeming greenskins pushed hard at each other to reach Magathus and his boarding party, dragging the headless Xenos with them, as there simply wasn't any room for it to fall. Magathus shouldered onwards into their mass, bringing the weight of his heavy Alaris Terminator armor to bear, and weathering the pounding blows of the orcs. Behind Magathus and his squad of Alaris custodians, a task force of Grey Shields, led by Allagan Moores, followed and added their firepower to the onslaught. Bolt round after bolt round exploded into the howling masses of the orcs, which in turn heightened the wrath of the angry Xenos warriors. The custodians were like a golden rock in the surging sea of screaming beasts. Their axes cut down the greenskin warriors left and right, while their ballistus grenade launchers reaped a bloody harvest. Every greenskin that got past the custodians had to deal with the warriors of the Adeptus Astartes that filled the corridor behind them. The Grey Shields cut the Xenos down with blade and bolt, while their captain crushed heads and spines with his power fist. But suddenly, the demeanor of the Orks changed. Their deranged shouting gave way to a more focused chanting. As their guttural voices unified, the cramped hall filled with green light. "Witch!" A Grey Shield Space Marine behind Magathus shouted, moments before blinding green lightning struck his helmet with the force of a las cannon, tearing his head clean off. An orc with a grotesquely swollen cranium came hovering above the teeming mass of its followers, its eyes rolling in mad glee, while thick drool dripped from its fleshy lips. Maniacally laughing, the weird boy gestured towards another Space Marine. The warrior suddenly cramped and fell, tearing at his helmet in desperation. While the rest of the Space Marines closed their ranks and opened fire, 2 of his brethren rushed to help him. They managed to tear off the helmet of the struggling Space Marine, and the warrior gasped for air as if something was stuck in his throat. With a gurgling noise, a red spherical creature burst from his mouth, tearing through the face and skull of the warrior in an explosion of gore. The blood-drenched beast, all legs and teeth and evil eyes, hissed and pounced to sink its fangs into the visor of the next Space Marine. As the roaring laughter of the weird boy became unnaturally loud, and the green light in the corridor grew more and more intense, Magathus felt that the battle was on the brink of turning against the Imperial forces. The Greenskins redoubled their efforts, pushing madly into the thin line of the Custodians, while more of the Grey Shields fell victim to the weird powers of their Psyker. One of the Alarus Terminators was buried under the mass of green flesh, his golden armor caved in and hacked apart. Magathus felt his anger rising. Uncountable years of service had ended to save the descendants of the all-too-prideful warriors who had allowed the Horus heresy. "Fight back! Fight back in the name of the Emperor!" Magathus shouted. His righteous wrath pushed back his doubts as he raised his Castellan axe once more, chopping off the hands of an orc warrior who had tried to strangle one of the Grey Shields. Yes, he felt no sympathy for the Adeptus Astartes, but his duty towards the Imperium outweighed all. The Space Marines concentrated their fire in overlapping corridors, mowing down more greenskins as they tried to win back the upper hand. A huge orc in clanking armor lunged at Magathus, nearly throwing him off his feet. With clenched teeth, the custodian fought to bring his axe between himself and the snapping claw of the beast, while he simultaneously tried to regain his footing. Suddenly, Allagan Mors was at his side, throwing a devastating punch into the flank of the Meganob. The beast grunted and fell to one knee. That was all the time Magathus had needed to recover, and with a swift strike, he decapitated the greenskin. Allagan Mors nodded curtly, and Magathus returned the gesture. Side by side, they charged into the fray. They were no comrades, but their common cause united them, as it had done many times before on their quest. But as long as the weird boy endured, it was to no avail. 2 more Space Marines exploded into a hail of ceramite and bone splinters, swarming the lines of the Adeptus Astartes with more of the snapping and snarling spherical red monstrosities that burst from their innards. Magathus felt the crazed stare of the Orc Psyker as it focused on him, and braced his soul for the inescapable surge of vile power. But nothing happened. For a brief moment, a look of dumb puzzlement showed on the face of the Orc Psyker. Then it was torn apart by mass reactive bolt rounds. Bewildered by this turn of events, the Orcs fell into disarray as they were assailed from both sides. While Magathus rallied his forces, Space Marines clad in battered orange armor charged in from the rear of the Orc troops. Chainswords whirred and bolters barked as the flames of Ares unleashed their wrath. A figure in tattered yellow robes over blue armor led them, a librarian. Magathus understood. Surely it was he who had banished the powers of the Weird Boy. The attack of Magathus's boarding party must have drawn in so many Orcs that the last surviving flames of Ares had gotten the chance for a counterattack. Now the 2 Imperial forces were able to crush the remaining Orcs in the corridor between them. With renewed fighting spirit, Magathus raised his Castellan axe and charged into the reeling greenskins. "Welcome aboard, the Spear of Ares," the librarian, who had introduced himself as Salus Damarco, had led Magathus's warriors to the bridge. It was lit only by sparse emergency lumin. "I fear I can't offer you any accommodations, as our other guests seem to be quite fond of our ship and not very eager to share." Magathus looked around.
We did not come here to exchange pleasantries. Where is Chapter Master Regentus? There are matters I have to discuss with him.
Dimarco shook his head and gestured towards the group of his warriors, some 20 battle-worn Space Marines. "I am afraid what you see here is all that is left of the flames of Ares. Our fleet was separated by the Orcs several weeks ago, and we have lost contact with our brethren. We think they have faced a similar fate as us. They too will have fought gloriously, and they surely honored the chapter with their last breaths." Captain Allagan Moores took a step forward and placed his gauntlet on the tarnished shoulder pad of the librarian. "But you shall not share their fate, brother." Dimarco's expression quickly changed, and a wary smile lit his eyes. "The days of the flames of Ares are not counted, then?"
They are not, said Magathus, but the days of our joint venture seem to be, Captain Moores.
The Primaris captain turned to face Magathus.
"Indeed, Shield Captain. But first, let us wage war together one last time. Yes, we've got a battle barge to liberate."
Weeks later, Magathus stood on the bridge of the Aeternatus Luminus again, and watched the repaired spear of Ares depart. Aboard the bright orange ship was a new chapter of Space Marines, born from the ashes of the past and united under Allagan Moores as their new chapter master. As the spear slowly made for the Mandeville Point, Magathus thought about what had been achieved. Another chapter had been brought back from the brink of extinction, ready to throw themselves into the war zones of the Imperium Nihilus. Magathus knew that he had done the Emperor's will, and yet he felt bitterness when he thought about the power he had just placed into the hands of the Adeptus Astartes. Deep inside, he would never fully trust the Space Marines, but maybe his personal notions about them did not matter. What mattered, he knew, was every front where mankind stood united, every front the Space Marines brought hope to. So Magathus was prepared to cast aside his suspicions, trusting in the Emperor of mankind, and ever willing to fulfill his duty. The Imperium might very well depend on it. That was Journey's End by Dirk Wehner, read by Jonathan Cox.